You won't believe what this HOA board president did to my trash cans. What started as petty complaints turned into a full-blown war that cost her everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a Tuesday morning when I first met Karen Thompson. I'd just moved into Meadowbrook Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood with perfectly manicured lawns and identical mailboxes. I was excited. New job, new house, fresh start. Little did I know, my trash cans were about to become the center of a battle that would shake this entire community. The first note appeared 3 days after I moved in. Bright pink paper tucked under my windshield wiper. Trash receptacles must be stored out of sight within 24 hours of collection. HOA Bylaws, Section 7.3. This is your first warning. No signature. No introduction. Just a threat. I looked at my trash cans. They were sitting beside my garage, exactly where the previous owner told me they'd always kept them. Nothing offensive. Just 2 standard black bins. But apparently, in Karen's world, this was a crime worthy of documentation. I didn't know who sent the note, so I did what any reasonable person would do. I moved the cans behind my fence. Problem solved, right? Wrong. So incredibly wrong. 2 days later, another note. This time it was left on my trash can. Bins must be stored in an approved structure or completely concealed from street view. Your current placement violates aesthetic standards. Second warning. Next violation will result in a $50 fine. $50 for trash cans. I was starting to get annoyed, but I still didn't know who was behind this. I built a small enclosure on the side of my house, spent an entire Saturday and $200 on materials. The cans were now completely hidden. I felt ridiculous, but hey, peace in the neighborhood seemed worth it. That peace lasted exactly 5 days. I came home from work to find a citation envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a $50 fine and a notice to appear before the HOA board. The violation: my trash can enclosure wasn't painted to match my house trim. I kid you not, they wanted me to paint the structure that was specifically built to hide the trash cans that nobody could even see from the street. This was when I decided to find out who was making my life miserable. I asked my neighbor Tom, a friendly guy who'd lived there for 15 years. His face went pale when I showed him the notices. "Oh no," he said, shaking his head. "You've caught Karen's attention. Karen Thompson. She's the HOA president, and she's intense. She drove out 3 families last year alone. The woman has nothing better to do than patrol the neighborhood looking for violations." Tom told me Karen's story. She'd retired early from some corporate job. Her kids had moved across the country, and her husband traveled constantly for work. The HOA had become her entire identity, her purpose, her battlefield, and apparently, I was her newest target. I decided to meet this woman face to face. I showed up at the next HOA meeting, ready to discuss this reasonably. The moment I walked in, I knew exactly who Karen was. Mid-50s, severe haircut, clipboard in hand, and a smile that could freeze lava. "Ah, Mr. Martinez," she said, not standing to greet me. "The trash can violator. We've been expecting you." I tried to stay calm. I explained that I'd moved the cans multiple times, built an enclosure, and didn't understand what else I could possibly do. Karen's response: she pulled out a binder, an actual 3-inch binder with my address on it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. My trash cans from different angles, different days, time-stamped and annotated. "Your bins were placed at the curb 14 minutes before the approved time last Tuesday," she said, flipping through pages. "The lid on your recycling bin was open approximately 3 inches on Thursday. And this photo from Saturday shows a bag that exceeded the bin's capacity by an estimated 10%. I sat there, stunned. This woman had been surveilling my trash routine like I was running a criminal enterprise. The other board members looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. Tom had warned me. Karen ruled this HOA with an iron fist, and everyone was too afraid to challenge her. That meeting cost me another $150 in fines, but it also lit a fire inside me. I wasn't going to be bullied by someone with too much time and too little purpose. I was going to fight back. Smartly, I went home and did something Karen never expected. I read the entire HOA bylaws document. All 73 pages of dense, boring legal language. And that's when I found it. The gold mine. Karen had been so focused on enforcing rules that she'd forgotten about the ones that apply to her. Section 12.4 stated that any HOA board member with a violation on their own property must recuse themselves from enforcement actions until their violation is corrected. And Section 18.2 required the HOA president to conduct a community survey every 18 months. The last survey, 3 years ago, I started documenting. Every morning before work, I'd take a walk around the neighborhood, camera in hand, and Karen's house. It was a violation goldmine. Her mailbox post was damaged, which violated Section 4.7. Her flower beds extended 6 inches past the approved boundary into the common area. Her house numbers weren't the regulation size. And the best part, her own trash cans were visible from a certain angle on the street. But I didn't report these violations. Not yet. I was building a case, and I needed the timing to be perfect. Meanwhile, Karen escalated. She started coming by my house at random times, looking for any tiny infraction. She'd measure the height of my grass with a ruler. She'd inspect my mailbox with a level to ensure it was perfectly vertical. She even knocked on my door at 7 p.m. to inform me that my porch light was excessively bright and created light pollution. The woman was obsessed. But with every visit, every petty complaint, I documented everything. I kept logs with dates, times, and witnesses. My neighbor Tom started helping, tired of watching Karen terrorize another resident. Then came the incident that changed everything. I was hosting a small barbecue on a Saturday afternoon. Just a few friends, nothing crazy. We were in my backyard, well within noise ordinances and HOA guidelines. Karen showed up at my front door, clipboard in hand, demanding to inspect my backyard for unapproved structures. When I politely refused, she threatened to call the police for obstruction of HOA duties. That's when one of my friends, who happened to be a real estate attorney, stepped in. She calmly explained that Karen had no legal right to enter my property without permission, and that such harassment could constitute grounds for legal action. Karen's face went red. She sputtered something about consequences and stormed off. But I saw something in her eyes. Fear. She knew she'd crossed a line, and for the first time, she'd been challenged by someone who knew their rights. The next day, I received a notice. The HOA was calling a special meeting to discuss my pattern of violations and hostile behavior toward board members. They were going to try to fine me into submission or force me to sell. This was Karen's nuclear option, but it was also my opportunity. I prepared for that meeting like I was preparing for trial. I printed out every photograph, every log entry, every piece of documentation. I reviewed the bylaws until I could quote them from memory, and I invited every neighbor who'd ever been harassed by Karen to attend. The meeting room was packed. Karen sat at the head table, smug smile in place, her precious binder open in front of her. She started by listing my alleged violations, a dramatic performance designed to paint me as a neighborhood menace. When she finished, I asked if I could address the board. Karen looked annoyed, but couldn't refuse without looking unreasonable. I stood up, my own folder in hand, and began. I'd like to start by addressing Section 12.4 of our bylaws, I said calmly. Any board member with an active violation cannot participate in enforcement actions. Mrs. Thompson, are you aware that your property currently has multiple violations? I projected photos on the screen I'd set up. Her damaged mailbox, her oversized flower beds, her visible trash cans, her non-regulation house numbers. The room went silent. Karen's face drained of color. Furthermore, I continued, Section 18.2 requires a community survey every 18 months. The last survey was conducted over 3 years ago. This means any fines issued in the past 18 months could be legally challenged, as they were approved by a board not in compliance with its own bylaws. The other board members were frantically flipping through their copies of the bylaws. Faces were turning red. Karen tried to interrupt, but I wasn't done. I'd also like to share these logs of harassment, I said, distributing copies. Documenting 73 separate incidents over 90 days where Mrs. Thompson has surveilled, photographed, measured, and inspected my property, often at unreasonable hours. I have witnesses for most of these incidents. Tom stood up. Then Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down. Then the Rodriguezes. Then the Patels. One by one, neighbors rose, each sharing their own stories of Karen's harassment. The dam had broken. Years of intimidation and petty tyranny came flooding out. The board treasurer, a quiet man named Michael, finally spoke. "Karen, is this true? Have you been conducting surveillance on residents?" His voice was shaking, but there was steel in it. Karen tried to defend herself, claiming she was just enforcing the rules, maintaining standards, protecting property values. But her voice lacked conviction. She knew she'd lost. "I move that we conduct a full review of all fines issued in the past 2 years," Michael said. "And I move that Karen Thompson be temporarily suspended from enforcement duties pending resolution of the violations on her own property." The motion passed, 4-1. Karen's single vote against couldn't stop it. But I still wasn't finished. I had one more card to play. "I'd like to make a motion myself," I said. "I move that we amend the bylaws to require board approval for any fine over $25 to prevent single-member harassment. And I move that we establish a formal complaint process with written documentation requirements to prevent selective enforcement." The room erupted in applause. The motion passed unanimously, with Karen forced to abstain due to her conflict of interest. Over the next month, everything changed. The HOA board conducted the required community survey. 78% of respondents reported feeling harassed or over-policed by the current enforcement approach. The board voted to refund over $12,000 in questionable fines issued over the past 18 months. And Karen, she was required to fix all violations on her own property, which cost her nearly $3,000. The board stripped her of unilateral enforcement authority. She could no longer issue fines or violations without majority board approval. But the final blow came at the next election cycle. I didn't even have to campaign against her. 3 other neighbors ran for president, all on platforms of reasonable enforcement and community over compliance. Karen came in 4th place. She wasn't just voted out of the presidency, she was voted off the board entirely. Tom was elected as the new president. His first act, establishing a neighborhood social committee to actually bring people together instead of tearing them apart. His second act, formally apologizing to me in front of the entire community. Karen moved out 6 months later. I heard through the grapevine that she couldn't handle living in a neighborhood where she no longer had power, where people weren't afraid of her anymore, where her opinion was just one voice among many, not the final word. As for me, my trash cans sit beside my garage exactly where they were when this whole thing started. Nobody's complained. Nobody cares. Because we're finally living in a community again, not a dictatorship. The irony isn't lost on me. Karen spent years wielding the HOA bylaws like a weapon, never imagining those same rules could be turned against her. She was so focused on controlling everyone else that she forgot the most important rule of all. When you make enemies of everyone around you, don't be surprised when they unite against you. My trash cans are still just trash cans, but they represent something bigger now. They're a reminder that bullies only have power when good people stay silent, that communities thrive on cooperation, not fear, and that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's simply standing up and saying, "Enough." Karen taught me an important lesson, just not the one she intended. She taught me that rules without reason become tyranny, that power without accountability corrupts, and that the smallest acts of resistance can spark the biggest changes. So yeah, my HOA Karen messed with my trash, and I turned the tables completely. But the real victory wasn't defeating her. It was helping my entire neighborhood remember what community actually means.